Okay. Well, we've got about 35 minutes to play around, so let's do that. I posted these on Monday, so remember if you'd like to have the PowerPoints in front of you, to look at the website the day before class, and you'll be able to print them if that's what you'd like to do. Okay, the first chapter, as we switch gears and start looking at nervous system function, is to learn about the nervous tissues. Okay? So you've learned about neurons and maybe a little bit about neuroglia. We've got to get deeper. We have to understand how neurons function. And this chapter is heavy in neuron function. Okay? All right? This is what we might get out of it. Lab, lecture, reading books, doing DSMs. Okay? Like muscle cells, neurons use membrane polarity upset as a signal, and therefore are keeping their membranes constantly ready. They are excitable cells. Okay? Neurons, muscle fibers, utilize changes in polarity across their membranes as a form of communication. Okay? Sort of like an on-off switch. It's either polarized or depolarized, and that is the signal. These cells here, the helper cells of the nervous system, the neuroglia, help create and maintain environmental conditions necessary for optimum neuron functioning. This doesn't mean too much at this point. I will tell you that if your body begins to concentrate potassium, if the nervous system is bathed in higher potassium levels than it normally is bathed in, it will malfunction, it will cease to function. Okay? High potassium levels can lead to death. The neurons are protected from high potassium levels in the blood by the neuroglia, by creating an environment that is conducive to their function. In order to carry their message, some neurons have to be long. You already know this. Increasing frequency of action potentials, not its strength, is how the nervous system controls the intensity of the message. Something that you can draw on, that you've heard about already. Action potentials do not change in magnitude. We don't go to positive 80 millivolts as a big action potential. Okay, it always depolarizes to the same level. It's how frequently they occur that tells us the message. By the way, a lot of your sensors are always sending action potentials to the brain. Okay? A lot of your sensors are constantly sending a low-level frequency of action potential to the brain. It's when the frequency rises, like when you're touched, then the brain knows you've been touched. Otherwise, it's just kind of getting a constant supply of action potentials to let them know that there's something going on out there. It's when the frequency changes that the brain says, hey, yeah, there's something going on. Okay, graded potentials may sum to threshold, depolarization causing action potential in the neuron. The source of graded potentials is the up to 10,000 synapses with other neurons. Remember I told you we'd see this word again, graded. Okay? A neuron, maybe we learned in high school, stimulates other neurons. But here's what you learn in college, that stimulation doesn't always lead to another action potential. Okay? The response of a neuron being stimulated by other neurons could be action potential. It could be nothing. It could be actually inhibition. The neuron could be inhibited. So what does all this mean? Most sources will tell you that neurons are highly interconnected with other neurons. As a matter of fact, the more I read about the brain, the more it is about neuron interconnectivity. What is this connection? It is the synapse. Most sources will say that a single neuron in your brain can be synapsed with 10,000 other neurons. That's a lot of synapsing. That's a lot of potential signal reaching a neuron. So what is it that causes the neuron to fire, reach AP, or not? That's something we have to learn this section. Okay? So you keep those in mind if you can. When we start lecturing after the test on Wednesday, I'll give you some more questions for the next exam. Blah, blah, blah. Functions of the system. Usually, you can sum up functions of the nervous system as communication and control. This one says master controlling and communicating system of the body. Real true. Although there are some others, like the hormonal system. But then this is the form of communication. Sensory input, integration, motor output. This is what we start talking about a lot more then. You have sensors all around the body. Some of them are sensing the external environment, some of them sensing the internal environment. They are constantly sending signals to the central nervous system. The central nervous system has the ability to sort this information, filter it, and then respond with motor outputs. Okay? Controlling muscles and glands, all right? Maintaining homeostasis. This is what the motor system does. When it's when it's controlling muscles like skeletal muscles, we call it the somatic motor system. You've heard about somatic motor. When we talk about controlling, let's say, smooth muscle or glands, we call that visceral motor system. Okay? Somatic referring to like skeletal muscle of the body, visceral referring to the guts. Okay? So this is pretty typical. We have neurons out in the body that are collecting up and sending information to the central nervous system. We have neurons out in the body that are distributing signals from the central nervous system, and then our primary integration location is the central nervous system, both at the spinal cord level and at the brain level. It's really cool. You'll find out the spinal cord actually has the ability to control some basic things. Okay? Spinal cord controls basic urination. It controls basic defecation. Okay? And it does it through reflexes. All right? Okay. Rapid and specific usually causes almost immediate response. Really true. You see it. All you got to do is be observant. You walk, you look at somebody walking, and if they bump into something, they alter their path. They change the distribution of body weight, whatever. They respond very rapidly. The big thing to add to your notes, if you're taking notes, is that while it's rapid and specific, it also goes away fairly quickly as well. A signal can be sent, and then it's over, and the stimulus is gone. Where in the endocrine system, the hormonal system, oftentimes it's a little slower and specific, but it tends to last a bit longer. Okay? Establishing and maintaining mental activity, consciousness, thinking, behavior, memory, emotions. Very true. Your arm doesn't have emotions. Your arm doesn't get sad. Your brain gets sad. Okay? Emotion occurs at the central nervous system level. Now this is kind of cool. Mental activity, all animals have some kind of mental activity. Not all animals have brains, by the way. Okay? But all animals have some kind of mental activity. Okay? And it could be something instinctual, like just a simple response to food in the area and taking a bite. Okay? Something as simple as that. Consciousness, we start to see perhaps more in the higher animals. Okay, now we can debate this, and I'm just throwing it out there. Consciousness, the understanding of self. Okay? Thinking, I think we're seeing throughout the animal kingdom, but advanced thinking tends to be on the higher end of animals. All animals have memory, right? Okay, all animals have memory. I've even witnessed emotion in animals. I think that there are some psychologists that would disagree and say animals do not have emotion, but I think I've witnessed it, okay? And certainly all animals have some sort of behavior. So on this planet, your animals typically have some kind of nervous tissue, not always a brain. Sometimes it's just the spinal cord, something like that. All right, ready to move on? All right then. This comes from your book, and it shows a very simple functioning of the nervous system. Very simple functioning of the nervous system. Sensory input, integration, motor output. Okay? You can see here that although this is not the best example of, let's say, sensory tissue, because the retina of the eye is considered an extension of the brain, so it's hard to necessarily consider it sensory, although it does definitely do a sensory function. You can see external stimuli being collected up by a sensor, impulses of the sensor then going to the appropriate location in the brain. The brain then figuring out what about it, okay? What about it? What to do about it, and then making choices. If you are thirsty, if you see a glass of water, okay, think about what goes into that. Now, if you poured the glass of water and you're pretty comfortable with what's in there, then you may just go and lift it if you're thirsty, okay? Understanding that the human brain is fairly complicated, you may be thirsty but see a glass that has fish floating around in it and then you don't lift it to drink it, okay? So there's integration going on in the brain, all right? A dog could care less if there's fish swimming around in the bowl of water, he'll just go and drink, okay? That's not to say that dogs don't integrate. It's just that we've attached the presence of life swimming around in our drinking water as something that then we should probably avoid, okay? Starts to, well, it's not complicated, it's just a lot to remember. This is how the nervous system is organized. The central nervous system, CNS, consists of the brain and the spinal cord. That's it. This is the central nervous system. Central nervous system is oftentimes considered then, again, the integration and control center, okay? Its primary job, interpret sensory input, dictate motor outputs that are appropriate. Take a look at the neuron count. How many cells in the body do you remember?
100 trillion.
About 100 trillion, 70 to 100 trillion. About 100 billion neurons in the brain. About 100 million neurons in the spinal cord. Okay? A lot of neurons in the brain. The peripheral nervous system, or PNS, then, consists of the nerve pathways to and from the central nervous system. So up here we see that the brain actually has some nerves that go to and from it directly, and those are called cranial nerves. And then the spinal cord has nerves that go to and from it directly, and those are called spinal nerves. And together, the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves, and then some of the receptor tissue, the sensory tissue, is all referred to as the peripheral nervous system. We will find some integrative ability outside the CNS. If you've had a course like this before, Principles of Biology, you may have learned that the intestines have a nervous system that is unique to them. The stomach and intestines have a system that has sensory tissue, motor tissue, and integrative tissue built right into the walls of the intestines. It's called the enteric nervous system. So we can't just say that the CNS is the only, let's say, system that has sensory, integrative, and motor control. This last thing here is a plexus, and it's just a definition for you. This is what the nervous system down in the gastrointestinal system is called. It's called the enteric plexus. It is a network of sensory neurons and sensory tissue, motor neurons, and integrative ability. Why? Because digesting food actually takes a ton of coordination, okay? And for some reason or another, the neurons are built right into the intestinal wall. You will see another definition for plexus later, okay? What is that? And you've encountered perhaps the term plexus for this crossing over of nerves. This crossing over of nerves, this is also referred to as a plexus, a nerve plexus. So sorry about the confusion. Yeah.
So the central nervous system, that's the brain and cord.
Yeah.
And then all the nerves branching off of that, cranial and spinal, all fall into peripheral.
Correct. As well as some sensory tissue. Okay, very good. The CNS is pretty easy to organize. The PNS then has various levels of organization. One way in which to sort of organize the PNS are those neurons that send information to the CNS, and those neurons which carry information away from the CNS. So, neurons and sensory tissue which carry information to the CNS are part of what's called the sensory or afferent division of the peripheral nervous system.